All right. Hi, nice to meet you again. Um,
Yes.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Jolitina Prophet, also known as Jolie or J Venus. I'm a dancer, teacher, choreographer, creative director for Outburst Dance Team. And I've been dancing for goodness, about 20 years at this point. It's something that I really take a lot of pride in, something I have a lot of patience with, and something I'm always curious about the more I learn about it. And yeah, definitely want to try to be a community oriented person, always trying to find ways to bring people together, especially in the artistic community in New York.
Mm.
Um, and yeah.
Thank you. Please let us know about your background and how you got into dance, how you grew up. Yeah.
Yeah, so my first dance classes were actually at the local YMCA in my town. At the time I was in, oh my goodness, I don't even remember how old I was at the time. But I was in about third grade. Um, and I started with ballet. And I don't know if I really loved dancing that much, but it was definitely fun. I did a lot. I did cheer, did gymnastics. I just was moving around and just jumping around everywhere. And then eventually they opened a performing arts school in my town. And so at first I wanted to actually go for singing, but then I feel like I just kind of naturally gravitated towards dancing. And so I ended up getting in. And so from sixth grade all the way until my senior year of high school, that's where my dance training primarily came from. So during my time in school, I trained in ballet, modern, specifically Horton, jazz, tap, honestly, like so many styles. But surprisingly enough, I actually didn't start doing street styles or hip hop or anything like that till after I graduated high school. I first started with heels training, with Dejana Claiborne. She has a studio here in New Jersey, Studio 426. And that was where I first started my training before she even owned a studio, and that was back in like 2017. And then after a while, I kind of wanted just to explore new ways to express myself, and so I started taking more hip hop classes. And ever since then, I just haven't looked back, and that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past, oh my God, 7, 8 years.
What genres of dance did you train in, and what are your favorites? Like you mentioned a little bit about it, but can you expand?
My favorite, oh, that's hard. I would say obviously my favorite is gonna be hip hop. I think that's just where my home is, even though I started later in my life. But growing up, my favorite style actually was ballet and lyrical. Even though I didn't have the legs and I didn't have anything fancy, I was really good at turns, but I think I just really loved how graceful it was. And I think it was something that people didn't really typically expect me to be good at or really to gravitate towards just because I would say I have a strong personality. Besides ballet, my other favorite style, or one of my favorites, is definitely jazz. I just love the attitude of it. I love the angles of it. I love the personality that jazz has. I feel like jazz and hip hop are kind of cousins to me, in my brain.
How do you think those genres and like your training and your favorites affect your creative process, your choreography, this and that?
Mm. Whew, that's a good question. I think my background as a whole affects my kind of creative expression because I feel like my vocabulary, my movement vocabulary is very wide. I think because I have had the opportunity to train and utilize my body in like so many different ways and kind of had to adjust to different pockets or like just different style expectations. I would consider myself very versatile, and because of that, when I am thinking creatively, I feel like I am able to kind of weave in all these different aspects. So even if I'm not necessarily, as strong on my ballet technique anymore, or my jazz or those kind of things, um, I do draw a lot of inspiration from like how the music is heard a certain way or how maybe a jazz dancer would approach it. And then maybe I would kind of tweak it to match maybe something that is a little bit more in my comfort zone or a little more my expertise. I also really do enjoy kind of like challenging what the parameters for certain things are. So just being able to think of it as movement and not be stuck in a box like all my training is lives here or all my training lives here and that's kind of where it ends at. Because I've had that experience and really had thorough experience in all those different styles and genres. I feel like it allows me to kind of be like a crazy mad scientist in a way of like just let me try a little bit of this and a little bit of that and we're gonna throw some of this in here and I feel like it helps me explore like unique textures and just different things that someone regardless of style, whether you've only trained in hip hop or only trained in jazz or only trained in one thing, like people who have amazing technique in their respective styles, but maybe have a little bit more of a limitation in that sense where they're thinking so strictly about those parameters. I really enjoy just kind of testing the boundaries and kind of seeing how I can challenge the genres and the styles and how far that can go.
You mentioned a little bit about your background, and how it all affects your choreography and creative process. Can you share your background culturally and how that kind of plays into dance?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm mixed race. I am Filipino and I'm Haitian.
Mhm.
But even though I do acknowledge both sides of my culture, I definitely grew up closer to the black side of myself, I guess, in a way. It doesn't feel segmented to me, but I know some people think of it that way. But to me, I am a black woman first and foremost. Um, I grew up around pretty much nothing but black people. And my town is very small. And I feel like growing up in that environment, even though I wasn't a hip hop dancer, like I learned so many cultural dances like growing up, like whether I was at the skating rink, I think that was the first time I ever heard like chicken noodle soup. And I just remember like everyone's doing it. Or going to parties when I wasn't supposed to, but going to basement parties and stuff and like learning how to whine and just learning how to do those kinds of things. And me, I'm from Jersey, so I learned like Jersey club dancing from the actual parties when they were coming up. And so for me, it's like dancing has always just been something I did, like even outside of being in school and training. Um, Even I feel like that energy carried with me outside of the studio, which I feel like more dancers we need to get into because I feel like now that everything is so commercialized, we forget the roots, especially of hip hop and where that comes from and the fact that it literally came from just people being on the sidewalk or being in a party and they're just like going at it with their friends. One thing I remind my students is like there's people that died for this style who like pioneered this style who never made a cent off of it. I feel like it's super important to remind ourselves of the roots and like where it really comes from and like all the inspiration. And yeah, even outside of that, being Caribbean adds a whole other side of it to me. The way I listen to music and the kinds of music I gravitate towards. I'm all about like really just feeling good. I think my passion for it really grew because I saw how much it just connected people, whether it was my friends in a basement party or my family in the living room or total strangers on the sidewalk when we're all at a concert and we're all listening to the same song. I think it just showed me like the joy and the power and emotion of it from such a young age that I feel like now that I'm an adult and I do it full time, I think it just makes me kind of give myself that extra push to really just challenge the style and bring my contributions to it the same way other people have contributed to it as well.
How is this community in the dance industry right now? Like, yes, it's great in the cultural aspect, the social aspect, but
Right.
professional.
Ooh, um, I think the community is it's in a really vulnerable place, and I don't think that's exclusive to dance. I think hip hop in general is in a very vulnerable place, and I think artists in general are in a very vulnerable place right now. Um, for dance specifically, what I see is there are because there's so much money to be made and there's so much industry behind it, I think the integrity for the art itself has definitely taken a back seat. And this is not exclusive to hip hop. I've seen it in so many other styles, especially now that I work with kids and I go to these competitions. And I do think sometimes we've gotten to a point where there's a lot of flash over substance, unfortunately, in the people who are educating us and the people that others are choosing to learn from. And I understand, like, if you want to be in a commercial industry, you want to learn from people who have also been successful in that industry. But I feel there's a misconception with what makes someone a good teacher or a good educator. And I think a lot of times people will prioritize kind of visibility, or whether it's like social media or just being known or seen by certain people, they will prioritize that over the love of dancing. And I know it sounds cliche or like corny to kind of say it in that way, but I think it really is that simple. And I don't necessarily think it's any one person's fault or anyone's fault. I think social media really changed the landscape for artists as a whole and what is kind of expected or what is the standard. And so it's easy to think, okay, this person has 20,000 followers, so of course they would be a good teacher, because how would they get 20,000 followers if they weren't good at what they do? Um, and I can understand that logic and that thinking. But I think the community really needs to like take a look at longevity, what's going to last beyond you, beyond your specific career, beyond your specific goals. What is really going to last us after we get older? We become the next generation, and the people that are coming after us, what are we leaving for them? What is the standard that we are setting for them? Because I see a lot of teachers who are, I guess, the OGs, the gatekeepers, they will complain, not really complain, but critique younger teachers and say, well, you guys teach this way and this, and this. But it's like, well, those people came from training with you. So they're doing it that way, it didn't come from nowhere. So I think we really need to do more work. I mean, even things like this with the newsletters and just things that will give people more resources to tap into the big picture and learn from each other. It feels like there's no really like resources for dancers. There's things here and there. There's a few podcasts here and there. There's a few books here and there. But it's not like a musician or like a artist who draws. We really don't have a lot of things where we can say, hey, buy this book. This is really, so I think it's really just thinking about longevity in the community and building more things that are going to last versus building things that are going to take us to that instant gratification, or like that really braggy or flashy accomplishment.
With community being somewhat of a hindrance, how has it been for you trying to, succeed and achieve your goals within the dance industry?
Oh, so, oh man, this one is actually a really personal question for me, because I started dancing really in the New York City community around 2017, 2018. And I actually stopped dancing for 2 years. And because it was just because I think when I first came into the scene, I was just trying to be anywhere and everywhere, and I really didn't understand. And plus, I was young. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. Um, and because I wasn't really in spaces that were for me, I felt like dance was the problem. And so I just stopped. And then after 2 years, I started dancing again. But when I came back, um, I really feel like I told myself, what are your intentions with this thing? It's easy to just go to class and do it, but it's not sustainable when you're just doing and doing and doing. And so I think I really realized community is so central. Like, we say it all the time, community this, community that, community this. But I think people really have to press on that and really like challenge, like, what does that mean to you? Not just what you want to receive, but also what do you want to give to people? It's easy to think, well, I want to be around people where I can get this gig and I can do this thing and I can end up in this place and people that's going to put me in this showcase. But I wanted to approach my return as paying my dues. And so I really wanted to kind of approach the community from a place of, okay, what I was doing before wasn't working. You know, the things I was around before wasn't making me happy. So maybe I need to give to this thing so that it knows my intentions and knows where I'm coming from. And in turn, over time, you know, the right things will come my way. And so when I returned, I started on a team in Jersey called RDT, and I ended up creative directing on there as well. But that eventually led me to coming back to New York and now being on Outburst and eventually directing for them. But just along that journey, I feel like my return the past 2.5 years, I've gotten so much more done than I did before I took my break because I just approached it with that mindset a lot more and not approaching my classes or my training from a mindset of speed or conventional success in the sense of, oh, you know, getting the video that's going to get 1,000 likes or getting in someone selects that's, you know, super famous choreographer from here. And, you know, not to say those things aren't nice because then I'd be lying. Um, but I think that once I redirected my focus to adding into the community, that's when I felt like people were way more receptive to what I had to offer. And I think I was able to show up a lot more authentically, which landed me different opportunities. And just over time, the community kind of fortunately built itself around me naturally. And I've been lucky enough to meet so many amazing dancers and people that have genuinely taught me so much. But I would have never met those people if I didn't fix myself first. You know, I feel like you can't receive from the community until you are a productive part of that community. And I think um yes, it had been a hindrance, but that was really mostly coming from the fact that I wasn't putting myself in spaces that were actually meant for me. And I think it took time away from dancing and away from the community and like kind of the distraction of it all, to kind of have that clarity.
Hmm. What would you say to an upcoming dancer choreographer who's trying to find these opportunities in networking? How do they go about it?
Um, I love this question because I wish I knew this when I was younger. My first piece of advice is always going to be talk to other people. We definitely live in a generation of like, we're a little antisocial, we're a little socially awkward, and it's not our fault. But the thing is, being social is a skill just like anything else. It takes work. And don't be afraid to talk to people. If you see someone in class that's doing something that you like, that's doing something that you want to be able to do, just go talk to them, you know, let them know, like, hey, you killed that in class today. Like, who do you train with? Like, you know, or do you ever teach? You know, like, that's always going to be like my first piece of advice, even before Google or anything like that. Talk to people because there's so many people out there who've gone through it, who've gone through their own experiences, you know, who can give you so much advice and so much information to just cut that search time in half. So, you know, like I said, my first advice is always going to be talk to others, even if it's the person whose class you're literally taking, you know, stay after class, introduce yourself, you know, thank them for class and ask them those questions. Um, and yes, again, it's a skill, it takes time, but it's definitely worth it in the long run. Um, Outside of that, I feel like just going online and just looking through different dance websites and resources. I think one that I like is called Dance NYC. I believe that's what it's called. And literally just scrolling on there and looking through forums. It takes a lot of dedication, but you know, if you want it bad enough, you'll put in the work. But you know, you got to just look for fellowships, just things that's out there, you know, different programs, follow different studios, just things like that. Get creative about how you're getting your information. Don't just, you know, give up because the first thing didn't work out. You know, you have to really like put in that effort. And that's why, again, I'm always going to go back to talking to people because other people have probably done this part already and can give you those resources that work for them. But yeah, Google is free. Google is your friend, spend some time on there. Um, One of the websites I use for jobs, Dance Teacher Finder, it's really good. It got me both of my teaching jobs that I have right now. It's cliche, but do your research, even just putting things out on social media. Um, Community artistry is another good one. They have a lot of class resources. They'll like show like all the different classes in New York City. Um, and yeah, it really just is a process. You really just have to take your time, figure out what's out there, and just keep searching.
Yeah. I like what you shared about, the lack of resources that dancers have nowadays. So maybe if I had a last question, I want to ask you about audition process
Mm,
and um yeah, just professional industry in New York. Like how
mhm.
do people survive that and come out, kind of successful in your own terms because it's kind of
Yeah.
subjective.
I love the phrasing of like successful in your own terms because like I will say for myself, like, I'm not signed. I'm not like conventionally booked and busy and dancing behind all these artists and things like that. But I do really consider myself successful by my own standards. And I genuinely think it starts there. I think like you have to really look at yourself and like genuinely what you want and what you're willing to work for when it comes to the industry. For me, commercial spaces are not fulfilling. I have done auditions, and I think really one of the best pieces of advice that I got from a really good friend, she just told me like it's tempting to want to show up and kind of anticipate what they want from you and show that you can be that thing. But what's even better than that is showing up as yourself and showing them why they want you and what you have to offer naturally. And I think that extends beyond the commercial space, like whether you want to be on the more artsy side of things or whether you want to dance behind other artists and get those kinds of jobs and those kinds of gigs, like you have to do it as yourself. You can't be anyone else. And obviously, do your part, come to the auditions looking nice, do your makeup if you do your makeup, really put your best foot forward, but make sure it's your best foot forward and not you trying to pretend to be something else or someone else. And I think that the more you're just authentic and the more you just present yourself, and again, it goes back to community and people. The most of the time we're getting jobs from other people referring you or other people having you in their mind. Most casting sites you got to pay money to use them, which is doable, it's a thing, but like not all of us got it like that. Most of the people that you see even dancing behind these artists got other jobs and full-time jobs or part-time jobs to sustain them in between. So I think it really just comes down to understanding your reality, your lifestyle, what things you have to address, what things you're responsible for. And then, unfortunately, you just got to make it work. That's what everyone does. And it just helps sometimes to know other people are in the same boat as you too. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just so many things, not just in the artistic community, but just in the world that we live in, is not set up for us to be creatives. And so if it feels hard, it's because it is hard. A lot of times we're looking up to people that are 15, 20 years into their career. We didn't see the first 3, 4, 5, 6 years where I think one time I remember Kira Harper had shared there was a time when she first moved to LA, she was literally homeless, just running from audition to audition. And so I feel like if we understood that more about each other, that we're all genuinely like trying our best to make this thing work, I think people would feel more successful with the things that they have, even if it's not the most flashy job or like the most impressive gig. I think just being able to dance every day in any capacity is a privilege. And I think the more we accept that and understand that, then we'll actually see more success that's already around us than we're giving ourselves permission to see.
Yeah. I want to get this in there, but how do you support yourself and keep your training up as a dancer?
I actually feel like this is something I've been struggling with lately because I work full time as a dance teacher. And so with kids, it's especially hard because, you can only train with them after school. So most of the time, I am missing classes or like these things. And I think that was hard for me for a while to kind of be okay with that. But how I kind of work to keep up with myself is one, I dance at home. I got a floor, I got some space, and I kind of set these little goals or challenges for myself and I'll freestyle. Um, I also work out, do cross training. I think that's really important. I want to encourage more dancers to cross train, whether you swim, whether you do Pilates, whether you do yoga, just anything that will move your body that's not dancing is so, so important to incorporate into your training regimen, just because you're going to get used to dancing after a while. You want to keep challenging your body and find new ways to move that's not just steps or in class. Um, I think also I actually have been taking less classes lately, not just because of my schedule, but because I want to be more intentional and thoughtful about the kinds of classes I'm taking. So when I do take class, I really try to take classes that align with my goals. And I feel like by doing that, I get way more out of my classes than I would if I was just taking 6 or 7 classes a week and just trying to keep up with like a quota. Um, but I really do try to be super intentional, understand, okay, when I go to this teacher, this is what I'm getting out of this class. And so when I get to class, that's what I work on, that's what I focus on. Um, and I think just living your life. I know like it sounds a little corny, but I'm a firm believer that becoming a better person will only make you a better artist. The bonds take time, at least if you want to have meaningful bonds. And so I think live your life, find different types of art that, fascinate you. I always want to approach from like a growth mindset. So whether I'm in class or I'm watching a battle or I'm watching a dance festival and I'm in the audience or I'm, in someone else's piece or again, just living my life. I always try to think about what I can learn from those experiences.
That's good. Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you for sharing. Thank you so much. And lastly, I want to offer you this space to talk about where we can find you, if there's anything we can see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right now all of my work is on Instagram, at j.venus.mp4. I do have some stuff on YouTube with my team Outbursts. We have some videos of us on YouTube competing at Prelude and at Elements. I'm really proud of those sets. They're very long. They're like 5.5 minutes. And we work really hard for like weeks and weeks and weeks to put it together. And I think it really does tell a really good story. I feel like even the pieces that are on my page, I always try to create showcase pieces that are going to tell a story. Um, and even with my choreography, I really just try to always have a character, always have fun. So yeah, Instagram and YouTube, that's where all of my stuff is at.
Great.